June the 9th, 1 Kings 5:1 through 6:38.
King Hiram of Tyre had always been a great admirer of David. So when he learned that David's son Solomon was the new king of Israel, he sent ambassadors to extend congratulations and good wishes. Solomon replied with a proposal about the temple of the Lord he wanted to build. His father David, Solomon pointed out to Hiram, had not been able to build it because of the numerous wars going on, and he had been waiting for the Lord to give him peace.
But now the Lord my God has given Israel peace on every side. I have no foreign enemies or internal rebellions. So I am planning to build a temple for the Lord my God, just as he instructed my father that I should do. For the Lord told him, your son, whom I will place upon your throne, shall build me a temple. Now, please assist me with this project. Send your woodsmen to the mountains of Lebanon to cut cedar timber for me, and I will send my men to work beside them, and I will pay your men whatever wages you ask. For as you know, no one in Israel can cut timber like you Sidonians.
Hiram was very pleased with the message from Solomon.
Praise God for giving David a wise son to be king of the great nation of Israel,
he said. Then he sent this reply to Solomon.
I have received your message, and I will do as you have asked concerning the timber. I can supply both cedar and cypress. My men will bring the logs from the Lebanon mountains to the Mediterranean Sea and build them into rafts. We will float them along the coast to wherever you need them. Then we will break the rafts apart and deliver the timber to you. You can pay me with food for my household.
So Hiram produced for Solomon as much cedar and cypress timber as he desired. And in return, Solomon sent him an annual payment of 125,000 bushels of wheat for his household and 96 gallons of pure olive oil. So the Lord gave great wisdom to Solomon, just as he had promised. And Hiram and Solomon made a formal alliance of peace. Then Solomon drafted 30,000 laborers from all over Israel and rotated them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month, so that each man was a month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was the general superintendent of this labor camp. Solomon also had 70,000 additional laborers, 80,000 stonecutters in the hill country, and 3,300 foremen. The stonecutters quarried and shaped huge blocks of stone, a very expensive job for the foundation of the temple. Men from Gebal helped Solomon's and Hiram's builders in cutting the timber and making the boards, and in preparing the stone for the temple. It was in the spring of the 4th year of Solomon's reign that he began the actual construction of the temple. This was 480 years after the people of Israel left their slavery in Egypt. The temple was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. All along the front of the temple was a porch 30 feet long and 15 feet deep. Narrow windows were used throughout. An annex of rooms was built along the full length of both sides of the temple, against the outer walls. These rooms were 3 stories high, the lower floor being 7.5 feet wide, the second floor 9 feet wide, and the upper floor 10.5 feet wide. The rooms were connected to the walls of the temple by beams resting on blocks built out from the wall, so the beams were not inserted into the walls themselves. The stones used in the construction of the temple were pre-finished at the quarry, so the entire structure was built without the sound of hammer, axe, or any other tool at the building site. The bottom floor of the side rooms was entered from the right side of the temple, and there were winding stairs going up to the second floor. Another flight of stairs led from the second to the third. After completing the temple, Solomon paneled it all, including the beams and pillars, with cedar. As already stated, there was an annex on each side of the building attached to the temple walls by cedar timbers. Each story of the annex was 7.5 feet high. Then the Lord sent this message to Solomon concerning the temple he was building. If you do as I tell you to, and follow all of my commandments and instructions, I will do what I told your father David I would do. I will live among the people of Israel and never forsake them. At last the temple was finished. The entire inside from floor to ceiling was paneled with cedar, and the floors were made of cypress boards. The 30-foot inner room at the far end of the temple, the most holy place, was also paneled from the floor to the ceiling with cedar boards. The remainder of the temple, other than the most holy place, was 60 feet long. Throughout the temple, the cedar paneling laid over the stone walls was carved with designs of rosebuds and open flowers. The inner room was where the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord was placed. This inner sanctuary was 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet high. Its walls and ceiling were overlaid with pure gold, and Solomon made a cedar wood altar for this room. Then he overlaid the interior of the remainder of the temple, including the cedar altar, with pure gold. And he made gold chains to protect the entrance to the most holy place. Within the inner sanctuary, Solomon placed 2 statues of angels made from olive wood, each 15 feet high. They were placed so that their outspread wings reached from wall to wall, while their inner wings touched each other at the center of the room. Each wing was 7½ feet long, so each angel measured 15 feet from wingtip to wingtip. The two angels were identical in all dimensions, and each was overlaid with gold. Figures of angels, palm trees, and open flowers were carved on all the walls of both rooms of the temple, and the floor of both rooms was overlaid with gold. The doorway to the inner sanctuary was a 5-sided opening, and its 2 olive wood doors were carved with cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, all overlaid with gold. Then he made square doorposts of olive wood for the entrance to the temple. There were 2 folding doors of cypress wood, and each door was hinged to fold back upon itself. Angels, palm trees, and open flowers were carved on these doors and carefully overlaid with gold. The wall of the inner court had 3 layers of hewn stone and 1 layer of cedar beams. The foundation of the temple was laid in the month of May in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, and the entire building was completed in every detail in November of the 11th year of his reign. So it took 7 years to build.
Acts 7, 1 through 29.
Then the high priest asked him,
Are these accusations true?
This was Stephen's lengthy reply.
The glorious God appeared to our ancestor Abraham in Iraq before he moved to Syria and told him to leave his native land, to say goodbye to his relatives, and to start out for a country that God would direct him to. So he left the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran, in Syria, until his father died. Then God brought him here to the land of Israel, but gave him no property of his own, not one little tract of land. However, God promised that eventually the whole country would belong to him and his descendants, though as yet he had no children. But God also told him that these descendants of his would leave the land and live in a foreign country, and there become slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, God told him, and afterwards my people will return to this land of Israel and worship me here. God also gave Abraham the ceremony of circumcision at that time, as evidence of the covenant between God and the people of Abraham. And so Isaac, Abraham's son, was circumcised when he was 8 days old. Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of the 12 patriarchs of the Jewish nation. These men were very jealous of Joseph and sold him to be a slave in Egypt. But God was with him and delivered him out of all his anguish and gave him favor before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. God also gave Joseph unusual wisdom, so that Pharaoh appointed him governor over all Egypt, as well as putting him in charge of all the affairs of the palace. But a famine developed in Egypt and Canaan, and there was great misery for our ancestors. When their food was gone, Jacob heard that there was still grain in Egypt, so he sent his sons to buy some. The second time they went, Joseph revealed his identity to his brothers, and they were introduced to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent for his father Jacob and all his brothers' families to come to Egypt, 75 persons in all. So Jacob came to Egypt, where he died, and all his sons. All of them were taken to Shechem and buried in the tomb Abraham bought from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father. As the time drew near when God would fulfill his promise to Abraham to free his descendants from slavery, the Jewish people greatly multiplied in Egypt. But then a king was crowned who had no respect for Joseph's memory. This king plotted against our race, forcing parents to abandon their children in the fields. About that time, Moses was born, a child of divine beauty. His parents hid him at home for 3 months, and when at last they could no longer keep him hidden and had to abandon him, Pharaoh's daughter found him and adopted him as her own son and taught him all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he became a mighty prince and orator. One day, as he was nearing his 40th birthday, it came into his mind to visit his brothers, the people of Israel. During this visit, he saw an Egyptian mistreating a man of Israel. So Moses killed the Egyptian. Moses supposed his brothers would realize that God had sent him to help them, but they didn't. The next day he visited them again and saw 2 men of Israel fighting. He tried to be a peacemaker. "Gentlemen," he said, "you are brothers and shouldn't be fighting like this. It is wrong." But the man in the wrong told Moses to mind his own business. "Who made you a ruler and judge over us?" he asked. "Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" At this, Moses fled the country and lived in the land of Midian, where his 2 sons were born.
Psalm 127, 1 through 5.
Unless the Lord builds a house, the builder's work is useless. Unless the Lord protects a city, sentries do no good. It is senseless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, fearing you will starve to death. For God wants his loved ones to get their proper rest. Children are a gift from God. They are his reward. Children born to a young man are like sharp arrows to defend him. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. That man shall have the help he needs when arguing with his enemies.
Proverbs for today, 16, 28 through 30.
An evil man sows strife. Gossip separates the best of friends. Wickedness loves company and leads others into sin. The wicked man stares into space with pursed lips, deep in thought, planning his evil deeds.